So Russia, Iran, Qatar are ranked 1, 2, and 3 right now in this past week to support our friends and allies. You've served on the National Security Council. So Russia, Iran, Qatar are ranked 1, 2, and 3 right now in the reserves of natural gas. Russia dramatically expanding its capacity to export LNG. Iran developing its own LNG export capacity. Qatar already the world's second largest LNG exporter. I think each would love nothing more than to displace American LNG on the world market. So I look at this, say, are America's interests better served if the world is buying LNG from the United States or from Russia?
So better served by LNG from the United States than these other countries.
And are interests better served if they're buying, the world is buying it from the United States or Iran?
Better from the United States than Iran.
So Russia continues its brutal war in Ukraine. We're debating now on the floor of the United States Senate aid. Iran's proxies are waging a terrorist campaign against Israel. We're debating that aid as well. U.S. troops are working across the Middle East. Americans are not only sacrificing their money, but lives of their sons and daughters, as we just saw this past week, to support our friends and allies. You've served on the National Security Council. In times of war, is it wise to give our allies and partners and neutral parties across the world an excuse to do business with our enemies?
So we're, as I said, a data and science-driven organization. I think it's incredibly important to look at the numbers, look at what we've already tripled just over the last 5 to 6 years in terms of our export. We're set to double in the next few-year period of time with LNG facilities that are already under construction, and we've already authorized a doubling beyond that. You look at that huge growth, and then you compare that with what our allies need. Europe's demand, as I said, is actually decreasing. They're decreasing 20% to 2026. Japan has already peaked their natural gas need and their LNG need. So we need to look at how much we've already authorized, how much we're already in the process, and comparing that to what our allies actually need.
So let's take a look at this. You said look at the numbers. So for 6 decades, the U.S. has been a net importer of liquefied natural gas. Since 2016, the United States has been a net exporter. And we take a look at the revenue that has come in since 2016, $134 billion trade surplus in LNG 2016 through 2023. Would you agree that trade surpluses are good for American economy and the United States as a whole?
I think trade surpluses are great. What Congress has given us the responsibility is to take into account the entire public interest, the entire economic implications, including for our farmers, for our consumers, and for our own industry.
It does seem that this is a focus based on climate, and we've seen that the Washington Post, the LNG clause is political theater, Biden's worst energy decision ever. So in terms of is the climate better served if the world buys, gas from the United States or from Russia?
So I feel incredibly proud to be part of an administration that's taking head-on the climate challenge that's facing our country, and we're making remarkable strides along those lines. I also think, in addition to the climate impacts of more and more exports of natural gas, we also need to take into account the economic consequences for American consumers, American farmers, and our American competitiveness. And it makes me very nervous when our independent data nerds come and tell us that prices are going to converge if we export more and more volume.
I'm going to get to the data nerds in a second, but your own boss, Secretary Granholm, has testified that Russian production of natural gas is the, quote, dirtiest on earth. Studies have shown that greenhouse gas emissions from Russian gas far exceed greenhouse gas emissions from the same amount of U.S. LNG. So I think the climate is better served if people around the world are using U.S. natural gas than Russia. But in your testimony, you argue that global natural gas demand is declining, and you cited 2 International Energy Agency forecasts. But I think you've ignored the forecast from your own department, the Department of Energy. Here we are, the EIA, Energy Information Administration. That's the green line. 2020, 2050, world demand for natural gas, according to your own Department of Energy. This is the chart, shows 4 leading energy models, all of which say that demand outside the U.S. is going to increase through 2050. Do you agree that natural gas demand outside the United States is going to continue to rise for the foreseeable future, as your own department is predicting?
So I think it incredibly important, as someone who's worked with modelers for many, many years, to look at a variety of models, question the assumptions going forward. I'm struck that if you look at where the International Energy Agency, and I served as the deputy to that organization and know some of the modelers who are working there, for the first time ever, their projections for overall demand across the world, including in the U.S., natural gas demand will peak this decade. And
So
that's their reference
you're
case
disputing
scenario.
the
That's not a
Department of
climate
Energy. You're
scenario.
disputing your own departments.
No,
You
no,
said you go to
those are
different
the
models and look at a lot of them, and others don't agree, but this is your own department right
I
now.
think it's important to look at all of those scenarios and other scenarios. All of those scenarios are also reference case scenarios. Those scenarios are not on track for where we need to be for achieving our climate objectives.
Mr.
If you
Chair,
look
my
at those
time
scenarios-
is running out. I appreciate your comment. I'm just bringing out what the Department of Energy of the United States is saying the global needs are. But Mr. Chairman, I do have some letters from government officials, dozens of small business groups from here in the United States, all over the world, deeply concerned about President Biden's decision to stop approving LNG exports. And it's a big pile. I just ask unanimous consent to enter these letters into the record. Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. What we have here is
Russia continues its brutal war in Ukraine. We're debating now on the floor of the United States Senate aid. Since 2016, the United States has been an exporter of LNG, Iran developing its own LNG export capacity. Qatar already has interests better served if the world is buying LNG from the United States or from Russia.
So better served by LNG from the United States than these other countries.
And our interests